Okay, here's one. Pain makes you beautiful. I heard Amen say that. And I remember relating it once to one of our sisters. Uh, she was going through stuff and she wasn't thinking that way. When I hear things like that, I mean, one way, and this is also a quote from Amen, pain's a bitch. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want anybody to be going through pain. You're not calling out for pain for yourself. I mean, not out front. Uh, yeah, a pleasure and pain, right? This world, in the balances of this world. Um, I don't believe it has to be that way, but it does in this world, in the way it is, in the way we're born into it. Yeah, until we overcome the fallen nature, it's part of the nature of this world, pain. And everybody's creating more than they're experiencing, whether they want to believe it or not. I mean, just, how many animals are you consuming? And if you had to suffer the pain of every single one of those animals, a lot of people think I'm crazy to say something like that, but no, no, it's really about, how much do you care about any creature suffering and how light are you wanting to walk on this earth and diminish that? Because it's all a come around. Suffering creates suffering. But yeah, you go on the other side of it. Now, let's say you're really already in your prayer, your living prayer to overcome that. And Amen said to me one day, the path to the kingdom of heaven, there's a lot of pain. Now, the way he said it was pretty intense, more so than how I'm able to repeat it. I remember the feeling because he was speaking directly to me. And I was like, oh, I wasn't thinking that way. I didn't want to think that way. But what he was really talking about that I could see is the death of the other ego is painful. And all the forms of it. See, because it's a word I could use is many tentacles, many aspects of that ego. I mean, there's our physical abilities, mental abilities, and all the things that we are capable of that we don't really give to our Father. Recognize it's all a gift from Him in the moment and used to glorify His happening. Yeah, all that. It's it's massive, overwhelming without having a grace-filled space and believing in miracles. So yeah, the witness of how pain is beautiful. You know, I mentioned it to the sister at the time, and I don't know whether she was in some physical pain, but I see it on all the levels because the physical pain was diminishing her physical abilities, which was making her feel more helpless, which was causing her to have to go to the Father more and actually, in some ways, be less arrogant, less uppity, and more heartful. And so, that was just what I was seeing in the moment. It's not just one example, it's like what you see all around from within yourself and outside yourself in your reflections that are in people around you. That I've watched a number of people that I've been living with and knowing for many years pass out of their bodies, get sick, become invalids sometimes, and sometimes for years. There was one sister, I couldn't even talk to her. She knew Amen, and she was in a battle with him inwardly, and she had walked with the brothers and sisters, and she was in contact with Amen and the brothers and sisters to some degree, but she was in a battle with him, and I couldn't finish a sentence with her for years without her coming against and arguing and being unpleasant. And that was my experience with her until she had a stroke and became invalid from that day forth. For many years, actually, and the brothers and sisters took care of her, mostly sisters. But I went to her in the hospital, and totally different countenance. And for the first time, we could have a conversation that was joyfully beautiful. And she told me, because I mentioned it to her. I would visited her a few times, and of course she was next door to us for a number of years, being taken care of in a trailer next door. But I mentioned to her, the difference. And she said, "Oh yeah, I was in a battle with Amen." And he would sing to me on the inside, she said, the songs that we have. And she didn't even want that. She was pushing him away. And since she had the stroke, and then she went through a transformation. And so, here was a space that was not pleasant for her physically and was painful, I'm sure, in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a death there. But in it was a rebirth. And that's pain making you beautiful. I mean, so many times, I see people, they don't see it in themselves, that uppity spirit, that takes us over. Because, it's a normality. It's our normal cover of who we are. And there's a false ego, a false spirit that's used to being fed. And makes you temporarily feel good. Your self-image that you are creating with this false image, ego. And then when something happens to break that down, the person may not be feeling really good at the time. But with spiritual eyes, in that humility that's created through that breakdown, you start seeing a beauty that you wouldn't see any other place. Now that's with spiritual eyes. See, that's the whole thing. What Amen was relating about pain making you beautiful is he's talking, of course, with spiritual eyes. And so, when we're going through pain, it's good to remember that he's making you more beautiful. I remember asking about another sister, that had traveled with him for years, and she was going through at the time things that were not pretty to watch. And I knew that Amen had actually sent her to what she was going through. And I could see that, being close to the whole event. And I asked him, I said, this sister really was very humble servant sister. And so what happened? And he said it wasn't because of anything she did wrong. It was to make her more beautiful. Different way of looking at things. When he holds us in his heart, he already sees us complete. So, he'll walk us through stuff that's tough when we're close to him. Because he's creating this beauty. And when you're outside of it and you have spiritual eyes, you can see it. When you're inside of it, of course, if you're in the depth of it, the only thing you could do is hold on to faith. If you're really inside of the pain, or at the time you're feeling it, yeah, man. That's all you can do is hold on to the faith, because you don't see the beauty that's being created, and you don't see the other that's being removed. In order to do that, it's not until afterwards. But yeah, right now we're in a time in the world, I believe, and there's been a lot of suffering in this world as it is, but according to what Amen's told us, that the suffering that's coming, the world has never seen. And so as a man, same thing's going on in this whole world. It's bottoming out. And it's going to be very painful. And that's where the faith comes in. There is a new heaven and a new earth being created. This is the promise. And with spiritual eyes, you can see it. It's happening in the midst. It's happening now, and it's speeding up because as the old world is diminishing, his new creation is being born. Amen.